All right, Don, it's all yours.
Okay, we need to start getting ready for spring, so you need to be building them boxes, get those nukes and stuff ready. We're going to expand our program out to doing artificial insemination in the springtime, and we're also going to sell nukes with breeder queens and with artificial inseminated queens. So you can either buy the queens separately, you can buy them as a package, and we're going to be doing classes, and we'll be doing 4 or less by appointment only, and we'll probably do them twice a week. So we'll start taking our student applications up in probably third week in March, because we won't be able to do, we'll probably hope to start our graft in the last of February, and we won't be doing the artificial insemination for at least 3 to 4 weeks into that. And then another thing I want to talk about is there a demand for wax presses, which you could take a large volume of boiling wax with old comb, put it in and squeeze it out. I'm going to hopefully find somebody that will build them for me and can maintain a good quality, and they'll be built similar to a vertical cider press. And you can put large volumes in there and just, you take a T-handle and squeeze it on down and you'll get 95% of your wax out. I'm doing it in small batches and I'm probably losing some, which I want to try to improve on that there. So if anybody's watching, that's one thing I'm putting out. And I know everybody wants to start talking what their problems is. I know everybody's got bees going in the winter. So if anybody's got questions about artificial insemination, just regular grafting, or bee problems and anything, just let's hear them. And welcome some of our new people we've got in here.
No question. Oh, Pat's got a question already. Go ahead, Pat.
On the artificial insemination, can you explain some of the reasons that you would want to do it? Where would you get semen from? Where would you get virgin queens from?
I am hooking up with a fellow that is a graduate of Sue Colby's class, and he actually paid like $1,500 to take the class. And there's nobody out on the East Coast here that's doing the artificial insemination other than up in, I think Joe Latchaw's doing it, and maybe one other one up, maybe up there in New York. But I think there's a demand for it. If there's, you know, the demand is going to be there. Most people, unless they're going to be breeding one particular stock, I don't think will be interested in artificial insemination. But he's also going to help me teach grafting, which most people, if they want to build numbers up fast, grafting might be your best bet. I have personally been cutting cells, which I like them the best, but sometimes you can't cut enough cells to meet demand. And right now we're going to try to do 500 to 1,000 queens a week. So we want to start moving on.
Oh.
And if anybody wants to talk more on that, what's the best way to do it, in the minis or the 5-frame deeps or the mediums, you know, I'll expand on that.
Where would you get semen from? Okay.
I'm going to leave that up to the man that's doing it. He claims he can import it from, he's using the Carniolan line from Sue Colby right now, and he has an access to the semen. But if there's a demand for Russian or Caucasian or any other line, we'll probably run those, and we'll be marking them accordingly and keeping them separate. You won't have to worry about mating with any feral stock or outside the line, because they will be artificially inseminated. And I imagine he's going to give you the option, if you take the class, if you want to take the queen with you that you inseminate, that would probably be up to you. My thing is, I would wait to see how the queen's going to perform before I take the queen. I'm not a person that can expand a lot on artificial insemination because it's not above my knowledge.
Any other questions, Pat?
So you're going to raise your own queens, and then he's going to come in and bring the semen and artificially inseminate them. would that be a breeder queen then? And how much are those going to cost if you
Well,
were to just
a breeder queen you'd have to come and pick the breeder queens up. Now, the artificial inseminated queens, I'm going to leave that up to him. If he wants to ship and we talk a little bit on it, I personally do not like to sell a breeder queen unless the person comes and I can show them the pattern and actually see the queen in there moving around and then sell it that way. Because it's just like any type queen you put in a cage. When it leaves your yard, you don't know what's going to happen to it. And with somebody investing that kind of money, I think they want to see what they're getting. But now there's a difference between a breeder queen and an artificial inseminated queen.
What's the difference?
Well, the breeder queen will be $200. The artificial inseminated queen will be at $300. That's where he is going to guarantee the line. He's using semen just from one particular line. Now, he might be grafting from 3 or 4 different lines. It just depends on the demand. I personally like a variety, it might be.
Is there any kind of guarantee when you buy a queen like that, a breeder queen for that kind of money? Is there any kind of guarantee? That's a lot of money to out.
Well, yes.
And really, I mean, you know.
I've talked to Joe Lacho about 4 or 5 years ago while I was part of his program on drone program he had. And I asked him, I said, would you guarantee that the queen was artificially inseminated, would not fly out and remate? And he just hesitated for a minute, looked at me and laughed. He says, there ain't no guarantees in anything.
That's what I was afraid of.
Well, I mean, that's the roll of the dice, that, you know, to be honest with you. You hope for the best. It's like people say, well, how many queens you lose, how many hives you lose. If I was to sit here and tell you I don't lose anything, I'd be lying to you. And anybody tells you they don't lose, you're going to have to do numbers when you do commercial beekeeping. You have to play numbers on your side all the time. So if you want to keep 1,000 hives going, you basically keep 1,500 or 2,500 and hope you don't get poisoned out.
What do you want to say?
What kind of class are they doing?
Oh, they're going to do one for, my grandson wants to know what kind of class. They're going to do one for raising mommy bees, queen bees. He's 5.
I want to ask you, what if all the boy king bees freeze up and you have no more bees to make a queen bee?
If all the boy bees freeze up, what do you do to make a queen bee?
You got to have a sexy queen when she flies out, and all the boys will follow her then.
All the boys from the neighborhood will come and follow.
Yeah.
Take that one up on his own.
Kids will come up with a good one.
All right.
He's pretty smart. Okay, that's all I had.
All right. Jim, go ahead. Your turn.
Yes, Don, you're talking about squeezing cappings.
You're breaking up pretty bad, Jim.
I'm actually doing like, can you hear me now?
Barely. It's real.
For squeezing my cappings, I have
Can you hear him at all, Don?
No, I think what's happening is he must be listening to YouTube. He's getting backfeed or something, because I'm hearing double things here and there.
I got a terrible connection. I'll type it in.
Maybe log out and come back in later.
Okay.
All right. We'll come back. Anthony, you're up.
Oh, I see several people posting already that they're losing bees and losing hives. Are any of you guys seeing any loss this early?
I probably have 8 or 10 8-frame hives that we haven't fed here at this bee yard here for probably 3 months. And I just go out occasionally and look at them. This yard is actually, I let it go whichever way it's going to go, because it's for students to learn on it. If a hive gets wax moth, which we done one on wax moth and one with hive beetles, because if we have a new student come in and they've never seen it, that we can show it. These are actually hives that students work. But now the ones that we lost, I walked out there about 8-10 days ago, and the hives was actually 6 or 7 frames of honey in them and no bees. So I don't know if they had swarmed or if they just absconded.
Yeah.
But they
Yeah.
didn't starve.
Yeah, okay. I was, it's my first year, and then, everybody does so much to try to get through the winter. And, I just see several people posting that they're losing so much already.
I think one thing to be cautious of is people at this time of the year don't actually check their hive as far as weight or stores, and they just start putting feed on them. And then we've dropped down to, I guess it was 31 the other night. And if you get a couple nights like that with feed on them, with sugar water, you're going to have so much moisture in the hive, you're going to lose bees because of that, not starvation.
Yeah.
That's the thing I would be worried about.
Okay. You mentioned wax moth. I made a good mistake. Not a good mistake. I don't think there's any such thing. I took a second box off full of frames because they weren't using it, and I put it in my laundry room, and I forgot about it. And then my maid cleaned up in there, and she stacked a few other boxes on top of it, and I didn't find it till the other day. Oh my God, what a mess! Wax moths found that thing. Oh, what a mess!
Well, now that you mentioned the wax moths, I did a bee club here a week ago, and
Yeah,
I took some comb over there, and I actually cut it out. I showed people in the bee club there, and they all said they would use it. When I pointed it out and cut the wax out and pulled that wedge bar out, it looked like pepper underneath it, and actually had a couple worms in there. So that's the stuff that you're going to put back in, even if you don't see visual damage. That's why I cut my wax out every year, start over.
Yeah, and that's right. I saw pepper all over the place, few worms and whatever, and that was a mess. So it's a good mistake. I won't do it again.
Well, it's all about learning, and that's one good thing about doing the chats. We can discuss it and that, and you have a debate going on all the time. People say to put it on wax moth crystals. The other option is to stack them where you have air and light getting in there. But then if you don't have some kind of rodent control, you're going to get rodents in there. And then that causes you a secondary problem. And then the bees don't want to go in that. So in the long run, I think cutting your wax out and starting with new wax every year, it just pays off in the long run.
All right. All right. I see 4 hands up here, so I want to let other people have a chance. Go ahead.
Okay. Matt, you're up next.
Hi, Don.
How you doing?
I guess one of my questions I had was we melted down some wax and I put it into Ziploc bags, separated each batch that I did, and I didn't get all the water out, and I didn't catch it until some mold had formed in there. And I went ahead and reprocessed it and strained it and melted it down and strained it through some fabric. And it looks good, it smells good, but I want to get your thoughts on whether that's okay to use that to make some foundation.
Yeah, if once you melt it and you have a block and you put it in a Ziploc bag and it starts to get some mold on it, I think you wasted wax by pouring it through a filter. Personally, I would have just brought it up to a boil and dumped it into a bucket or a container. And if you have at least a 3 or a 4 to 1 ratio of water to wax, all your impurities, mold, whatever is going to be at the bottom. And you could just, when it cools off into a block, you could probably just take your hand with some water that's in the bucket and it'll come pretty clean. As far as the smell, it's not going to hurt it. If it doesn't smell like that honey smell, it'll smell like wax after it sits for a little bit. But one word of caution to do is don't store wax that you processed with mothball, crystals, or balls, because it'll absorb the smell and it's totally worthless.
Well, in a side note, and along that, I processed some wax that I pulled out of a frame the other day in the mosquito truck, drove by out front where I had all the stuff, and we had to toss that wax. It's unfortunate, but
I don't think just by driving down the street would have contaminated it.
I smelled it. I could smell it where
It smelled like pyrethrin.
whatever the stuff. I don't know that that's what they use, but whatever they use, that's what I could smell.
You must have had a direct spray.
We're only 20 or 30 yards, not even that
Not
far.
even yards, feet.
Yeah, 20 or 30 feet from the road.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I should have closed everything up, and I didn't think, heard it too late, but
Sometimes accidents like that teach you, and by getting on a chat like this and mentioning to other people, they get a little more cautious then.
Yeah, don't process wax on mosquito control night.
right. But I'll let somebody else raise their hand. Thank you.
Didn't we have another question?
Okay. All right, John Myers, your turn.
Hey, Don.
Hey.
Hey, I was wondering about those Ross rounds. Do you have to use that foundation in them, or you just use the ring on them?
You talking about regular Ross round foundation?
Yeah. Do you have to use that clear or like thin foundation or whatever in it?
If you're just starting out your first go around, I think I would buy 10 or 20 sheets of it. But what I found we can do is we take and don't even emboss it. Just take and get your wax more heated up more than you would normally do it, and just take a dipping board and dip it down in there and just cut it into about a 1-inch strip. And all you have to do is lay those Ross rounds on the side and put your starter strip at the top, and they'll draw it down themselves. But make sure that you clean that wax good and it's light looking or light yellow, and don't make it thin, because if you make it too thick, that's why you want to run your wax a little hotter than normal, because the hotter the wax, the thinner the sheet will be. And you don't have to emboss it. Just put it in there, and that gives them a place to go from.
Well, I don't really have nowhere to make any wax or anything, and I didn't want to use the foundation if I could keep from it.
Well, on a Ross round, the only problem you have on that is sometimes the comb will get cockeyed in there. So a starter strip or a full sheet of that they call it thin surplus to put in there. I mean, that's not very expensive. You can even buy 10 or 15 sheets or 20 sheets and cut it 4 strips. I've even done that on a class, show people how to do that.
I was wondering too about, have you ever seen those hog half comb cassettes?
If you was to compare all the way across the board on cut comb, hog halves are, to me, at the bottom of the list, because once you put them on the hive and they start to draw them out, and you only have 2 or 3 sections in there, once you start cutting that plastic apart, they're unusable. Where if you have Ross rounds, you could pull 2 combs out of the middle, 2 frames, and just replace those. And even if you pull 1 frame out, you're only losing 2 that's not even completely sealed or capped off. You can look at them, you can take them apart. They're a little bit more expensive, but in the long run, they save you time and money. If you got a van and you got a box of wax, you could go to your out yards and change them things out and put the caps on them and do them ready in a van where the bees won't be on you.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. If they didn't fill them up all the way up.
Have you bought the hog halves already?
No, I haven't bought either one. I was thinking about getting one or the other.
If you don't have a lot of bees and you don't have really strong hives, you're probably your best bet would just make cut comb. You can either make a cutter, cut it by hand, or you can buy a little square cutter from the bee supply house. Just lay it on a cookie sheet, cut it, let it drain a little before you put it in the containers.
Yeah,
Always think about doing things the cheapest way, not how much you can spend on stuff.
Yeah. I was wondering what time of year do you start feeding them sugar water again, like February or late February, or when I'm up here near Knoxville?
Well, if you're in Knoxville, I would start feeding them probably middle of February. It just, you're gonna have to look at the weather. If you've had extremely cold weather in January and up into February, you want to wait a little bit. But we feed as early as possible to get the queen stimulated.
What what limits, like staying above 50 or something during the day, or?
No, you want to, if you're going to start feeding, you want to keep up around 60 degrees, because if you feed them and it's not warm enough, they're not going to draw wax.
All right. That's all I had for now, Don. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next up is Josh. Go ahead, Josh.
Oh, me already? Okay.
Hey.
Hey, Don, I wanted to tell you, your group is great, and you're great. I really appreciate you, and those are everybody in the group. All your encouragement and stuff. I've talked to a couple of local beekeepers. Like, they don't want to give out any of their secrets because they don't want you stepping on their feet or something. I don't know. It's kind of strange, but I appreciate all your advice and info and all your videos and these chats and your Facebook group. I just wanted to say that. That's all.
Well, I'm here to help, get you going. And just what you said there, I mentioned that at the Bee Club, the last club that I spoke at. When I was in Ohio and I talked to old experienced beekeepers and I asked them how to do different things, and they would give me a line of what to do. And then when I went back the following month, see them at a bee meeting, they would point their finger at me in front of the other members and make fun of me, saying, "You're stupid. You actually tried that stuff. I was just funning you." And to me, I go out of my way to help people. I mean, if someone's not going to help other beekeepers, it's not a dog-eat world. I mean, there's no big secrets out there other than the biggest thing is hard work, and you got to stick with it. Honey is easy. Making queens and nukes is a lot harder than people think it is.
Yeah.
But stick with it. Don't get discouraged.
Hey, I appreciate it, and like I said, don't quit doing what you're doing, because there's a lot of people out there that are new to it, that like me, that we're really learning a lot and appreciate it a lot.
Well, thank you.
Hey, thank you.
All right, Jeff Freeland, go ahead.
Oh, hi guys. I just wanted to give you a quick update on the bee shed experiment. Of course, we're in northern Maine now, okay? So we're running sugar boards dry, and the shed so far has been, the heaters haven't even come on. They've kept the shed at around 42 degrees, 4 hives, insulated, and I have a low fan inside the shed to circulate air, and about every 3 days I open it up, let it air out. I don't have a CO2 gauge, but one day I did experiment with trying to bring the humidity down further, and I found out that the dehumidifier was actually heating up the shed, and it got up to 60 degrees. I happened to open the door up to turn it off, and one of the hives was they were enjoying themselves walking around on the front of their hive.
Are you experiencing any dead bees? Or
I get some, but they seemingly are ones that are
old
ones, yeah. And one day I was up in the 40s. I left the door open, let them fly around, but they didn't go too far. I mean, the ones that did fly out, they didn't make it back, I don't think. But and I try to keep it cleaned up so we don't get any mold or anything like that in there, as to the extent possible. And let's see, probably I'll change up or add new sugar boards here early next week. So it's been about 6 weeks they've been in the shed.
What about your dysentery? Are you getting any dysentery right now?
No, none.
The only thing I'd worry about is putting too much sugar on them. It's just like a person. If you eat and drink too much, you got to go somewhere. And
oh no, that's true.
yeah,
that's
the
true.
bees can't get out.
Yeah.
I would think more people would do them around 38, because past experience with bees outside, it could be just the sun, but my bees start flying 41, 42, 43. I'm getting bees flying.
Yeah, they were fine, but they weren't making it back.
Oh.
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, they'd fly out and they kind of reorient themselves. What's that? They
didn't get lost. They got back in the hives.
No, they kind of landed on the doors trying to warm up from the sun, and then they couldn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
A few, maybe a few. I had a couple that were hitching a ride with me, but No, they seem to be fine. I just keep an eye on the humidity level. If I don't bother it and I just leave it as is, they seemingly, the temperature average in there is 40 to 42. And we've gotten down as low as about 15 degrees one night. So the temperature is relatively stable. The humidity level, I got some things in there to draw in the humidity. I mean, other just passively, but it seemingly stays in the neighborhood of 70% so
Good,
far.
good.
We haven't got into the deepest part of winter yet here, obviously, but it's seemingly. I checked one on sugar board. They were into the sugar board, and I was able to add a frame of honey that I'd culled from a dead hive. But other than that, on the dead hives, I had one, but I pretty much determined that that was a queen that must have decided to go belly up.
Did the queen actually die, or did they just slow down in laying or stop laying?
Well, when I treated them for Varroa back in September, she had some brood in the hive that she'd laid. And so I figure sometime probably in October, they must have hatched and she must have passed on, because when I got ready to move the hive, I checked them. The only thing in there was no brood and just collector bees. So,
Well, you know, there's been a couple people sending me emails about they can't find queens, and you know they're looking to buy queens to replace their hive.
Yeah.
This time of the year, people get in their hive, they don't see eggs. There's some queens that actually have stopped laying. And if you're looking through a veil and you don't see eggs, you know, you start panicking. And then you don't find a queen, which the queen, if she's not laying, she's going to get a little smaller. And if you've got a large amount of bees in there, people jump to the conclusion, replace the queen or combine. So I'd kind of tell people, if they're kind of listen to them, if they're kind of quiet, you probably have a queen in there, it's just not laying.
Yeah. I was thinking that might be the case. I went ahead and put them in the shed initially.
Mm-hmm.
And then about when I went back and checked, they had most of them had vacated the shed, their hive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, I better look inside it. And plenty of honey, but no other. All the rest were dead. Most of them were outside of the hive. So that's where I determined I must have lost the queen somewhere during the prior month.
Things happening, beekeeping.
Yeah, that's right. It was just, anyway, that's where we're at now.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. We got Pat. Got a question, Pat? Comment?
Yeah, I had an answer, kind of. Anthony was asking about everybody talking about losing hives. And one of the biggest reasons people lose hives is starvation. And you'll see a lot of people right now, everything's getting blamed on mites. And it's because they don't know that their bees need to be fed or what time of year they should be feeding them. And some people will feed them during nectar flow because they don't know the difference. And so a lot of new beekeepers, and up to probably the third or fourth year, make that mistake. Rather than learning what the bees are doing at separate times of the year, they're just making assumptions and then they lose their bees. If the bees are up at the top of the box in the wintertime, they're starving. They've already eaten all of their food. But if you're a new beekeeper up to the third or fourth year, feed them. And if there's nectar flow on, they won't take it. But you need to know when nectar flow is in your location, and don't feed during nectar flow because it's not legal honey if it's not from flowers. We all know that part of it. But the biggest problem is starvation and people not recognizing what's going on in the hive different year. So for a new beekeeper, take notes. Every time you go in your hive, what time of the season it was, what the temperature was, and what you saw. And so next year when you go in that hive and you don't see eggs, you'll know that it's because this time of year the queen is slowing down. But most of it is just, you know, learning what your bees need at the different times of the year. And that's where, you know, talks like this and classes really pay off. And wax moths, I had on that one. Wax moths, one of my students put all of his honey supers in his garage up in the corner against the wall, and the wax moths completely destroyed his woodenware, his wax, went up into the wall and destroyed the 2x4s in the wall between his garage and his house. So be careful where you store your.
He left them for a while.
Yeah, be careful where you store your supplies. That's all.
Okay. Daryl, do you have questions still?
Yes. Yes.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Can
Yep.
you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Hey, Don, how you doing? You remember
Okay.
me?
Oh, yeah, the dog raiser,
Yeah, that's me.
German
Well,
Shepherds.
yeah, I got over being allergic to bees, so that 16 didn't do too good. But my question is, I sold 25 nukes last year, and
Good.
but it took me from April to August to sell that many
Why?
because I don't really know what I'm doing. So I just wanted to know, how would you do it a little faster? What should I got 17 hives, so I got plenty of resources.
Had anybody told you if you become a student, take classes, you get on my webpage, I send you all the business you can do?
No,
And you
no,
put
it
all
wasn't.
that-
That wasn't the problem. I couldn't make them. I didn't know how to make them quick enough.
Come down and spend a few days. You'll find out you can't make boxes fast enough to put the bees in.
Well, yeah, but how many hives would you set up to do 25?
I would set up 50, 75. Because the minute you sell them, you're going to have to put new queens back in there or queen cells. You want to keep the cycle going.
Okay. All right.
I mean,
Well, that,
you can ask Jim. You know, he's been down here, he's seen it, and whatever you think you need, figure 4 or 5 times what you think you're going to need, and then you'll be close.
well, my only thing is I just want to sell like 25 in a couple of months, and then I'll be done.
Why?
Because I'm retired. I'm doing this just to make it fun.
I do too. I'm having
I
more
make
fun tonight.
But I'm making it fun, and it's nice to sell the bees. I mean, I'd rather sell the bees than the honey.
There, see, now you sound like me.
But what do I just set up, like 4 8 frames, and
You can use your 8 frames to build your 5 frames up with, you know, and then keep your 8 frames in singles, and they'll be making cells. And you cut the cells out. That's the easiest way. Just that alone.
oh yeah,
You know, you
so
can
that's
keep
the way I've
busy.
been doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you can keep more than busy.
Yeah, it's all been cell cutting. Believe me. Yeah, that's all it's been.
I would be building boxes right now, because if you sold 25 this past year, then by springtime, those people are going to each want to bring you probably 2 or 3 people. So better figure on 75 to 150.
No, well, I don't want to sell that many. 50 is tops.
Yeah, that's what everybody says.
I'm retired, remember? Thank you, Don. I appreciate it.
All
right, over to Paul. Paul, go ahead.
Don, I had a few double 4-frame nukes. I was running a 10-frame box divided down the center.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had 2 supers on top, and then I had my B-Max feeder on top of that, which I divided to feed both halves.
Mm-hmm.
But I must have left like a 1/4-inch gap in the feeder, and all of the bees from one nuke went over to the other one.
Mm-hmm. And now you don't have a queen.
Well, I didn't want to go through the nuke looking for a queen, because the weather's been kind of chilly up here.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just hoping that they didn't kill off both queens.
Sometimes they do, especially in the fall. You know, there's a lot of ways to raise queens, and I probably talked about it on every chat. We used to run mini nukes, double mini nukes, and bees migrate from one side to the other. And if you caught one side of the queen, and then the other one's not ready to catch. When another queen comes back, sometimes they migrate over and get the other queen. Or sometimes the swarm is so big coming back, they get in there and kill both queens. So we found that doing singles, which works out a lot better. And same principle with the way you're doing that box with 4 and 4 and double stacking them. The only way double stacking seems to work out is 5-frame nukes going through the winter, whether you're in the south or in the north. And I've got people in New York and Indiana running double 5-frames and going through the winter, no problem.
Well, that's why the only reason I did it was because the winters up here in New York are kind of harsh. So I figured if I run 4-frame double nukes in a 10-frame box, you know, it'll save a little bit on heat for them.
Well, you hit on the whole thing that's killing bees too is, you know, just like if you live where you're at and you've got a 2-story house and you don't use the rooms upstairs, common sense, block them off. So that's why people up north are blocking their bees off, running them in singles with a Hive top feeder and just maintain them. Put feed on them if they need it. Keep the heat down. They actually use a lot less heat. They use the honey to make the heat. So if they're not consuming as much, it's going to go through the winter longer.
Yeah, I have some 5-frame singles also that I'm hoping will make it through the winter.
You need to have feeders on them.
Yeah.
But you know, beekeeping is trial and error. Right where you're at or where anybody's at is going to take you 2 to 3 years to figure out how things are going to work in your area.
Yeah. What do you think the chances are of a queenless colony making it through the winter?
Well, if it's queenless, for sure it's slim because usually by January, mid-February, they're died off.
Yeah.
Because the bees that's born in the end of November are going to die by February.
Yeah, they won't rear no new queen during the winter then. If they had some eggs in there, would they?
I've had 4 or 5 emails and people sending me stuff about that. I have a hive. I think it's queenless. Where can I get a queen? Should I combine them? I don't think that's a good idea because if you can't check and make sure you got a queen in there, you combine a hive, you're liable to lose a good queen there.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, Anthony, you're up. Go ahead.
Yeah, when I had made the first comment about people were losing their bees so much, and then, you know, Pat said, you know, like, and I understand everything she said about starving, but what I was thinking is people put their bees up for the winter. Most people are putting 50, 60 or more pounds of honey in there to get them through the winter. And I was surprised to see people saying they were losing hives before mid-December. You know, that was what I was thinking, you know, so I don't know why they're losing them. And the other thing is, about 2 weeks ago, I did requeen 3 of my hives. And when I went to get the 3 new queens was the same time I had a friend of mine that used to have bees 20 years ago, and he wanted to get back into bees, so he wanted to go with me and get a couple of nukes for himself. So I took him to the bee farm. He got 2, and I said, what the hell, I'll grab another one for myself. So I bought these, I had these 3 bamboo cages. They're long cages, they're made out of bamboo, and they put the queen in there, and then they put a few workers in there, and we set it down. And while we were putting the queen in the second one, I noticed the bees coming out of the queen cage. So the worker bees, the nurse bees, were able to fit between the bars. And maybe because Apis cerana is smaller, that little smaller than a mellifera, so maybe that's why they were getting out. So we can't really put worker bees in the cages, but some still had them in there. Now we pay, we're getting ready to leave, and what the hell am I going to do with these queen cages? I don't want bees flying around the car. So the lady from the bee farm, and she's been doing it 50 years as well, she told me I can just put them on top of the nuke inside the cover. I said, wow, is that going to be all right? And she said, yeah, it'll be fine. And I didn't think so, because there's going to be 4 queens in that nuke box for the 1-hour ride home, and the bees can go in and out of the cages. So I think someone's going to die. And she said, don't worry, nothing's going to happen. If anything happens, I'll replace it. So I put the queen cages inside under the cover, and I came home, and everything was fine. The queens were fine. And I figured if the bees can go in and out and they haven't killed anybody, it'll be okay. So I put them in the 3 hives and left them in the cage for about 12 hours. And then I went back and I looked, and there was bees that had gone inside the cage with the queen, but the queens were fine. And so I just let them out. So they were let out in less than 24 hours. And then I left them alone for 4 or 5 days. And when I went back and checked, they were all fine. So it worked out. But based on what I know, and maybe what we all know, you wouldn't think that that would have been okay, and no queen would have got sacrificed, but it worked out okay.
Yeah, all my experience, I wouldn't have chanced it. You know, it's just things that I've seen. The only way I've seen things like that work now, we've had 4 and 5 virgins hatch out at a time. I've let virgins walk into a hive that had no queen in it. And sometimes they accept them and sometimes they don't. But yeah, if you put 4 or 5 queens into a cage with other queens and other bees, normally just attack them queens. That's what I've seen. But, you know, you might have a different strain of bee down there. They're more friendly with the bees. I don't know. Each area is different.
Yeah. And what was I going to say? I forget what I was going to say now. Okay, I forget what I was going to say. The 70s were very hard on me. Okay, go ahead. Let someone else ask a question.
Okay, Dan Pratt, you're up next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Don, I'm a first timer in the chat, and
Welcome.
thank you. And I discovered you on YouTube, and my story is, very briefly, is I assisted a neighbor and dear friend 40 years ago in Houston, Texas, in keeping 4 hives of bees. And always said, when I retire, I'm going to get back into beekeeping. Well, I retired in August, and so I'm setting myself up for the springtime. And I've ordered my bees from Joe May, and I am looking very forward to that. Now, I have several questions, but one is perhaps beekeeping between Houston, Texas 40 years ago and where I live now in Louisville, Kentucky is hugely different for a number of reasons, obviously. But my recollections of beekeeping is that we supered with 1 super only and kept removing frames of capped honey and replaced them with foundation in those days. And I'm wondering why, as I research supering beehives for honey purposes, that that's never, you know, a frame by frame harvest is never talked about too much, or I've not heard it talked about too much. But it was very productive, as I recall.
Right. And that's why we have these chats, you know, because each person has an individual situation. People that stack up hives to get them super high, it's counterproductive in my belief. I personally, if I'm pulling honey, I'll do a frame here and go to the next hive, pull a frame. And then if you don't have foundation, even as long as you drop a frame back in that space between 2 frames that you draw it out, they'll draw the wax, they'll make honey in there or brood, whatever they want to do. But there's people that like to stack them up, you know, I don't know, it's an eagle thing. You know, I got 10 boxes high. That is a hive that's borderline going to swarm at any time. If you don't go through to the bottom and you know, once a hive gets to a certain point, bees do basic things. They multiply and they store honey.
Right.
If they get overcrowded, that bottom box, the bottom 2 boxes, if you're not in it, you could have 10 frames in there that's got queen cells. That means that hive could swarm 2 or 3 times and take the honey with it. So it's to your advantage to go all the way down, manage that hive, and if that's the situation, that hive could produce 10 more hives for you.
So if I can pull a frame of capped honey and replace it with a starter strip, that would be perfectly
But
okay. in
it's,
your
yeah,
opinion.
perfectly okay. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what they do in trees. I mean, they put their own comb there.
Yeah.
I try to make beekeeping as easy as possible. You know, when you start getting everything out there too complicated, people want to give up on it. It's not rocket science.
Second question is, I wanted to make sure I understand your views on foundation. And so I think what I hear you say is that you rotate out any hive comb, the brood comb, at least every 3 years. And
I try to.
I've heard you say chocolate color and things like that. But I think I've also heard you say that you never reuse honey super comb. In other words, you don't extract it and reuse the comb. Is that correct?
If I extract in one particular year, like in the springtime, if I'm extracting in, say, March, the end of March, up in April, I extract that honey. I might use that comb all the way up into the fall, get the goldenrod. And at that point, I do not store comb. I got 200 or 300 boxes back there by the bee lab right now. The frames are in there, but all the wax and the frames are scraped down, ready to go with new wax in the spring. Bees build naturally, build wax all the time. So by rotating it out, you know, you keep your wax clean, you keep your honey, I think, in a better grade. As far as rotating comb out of the brood chamber, we sell nukes. So if you're going to mark queens, mark the frame, you can tell how old the stuff is. 3 years is pretty good. Even on organic farms, you're going to pick up residues and stuff. It builds up in the comb. So by changing it out 3 years, 4 years, you're talking about comb that's chocolate, light cocoa color to dark chocolate. But when you see old beekeepers, I've seen comb that was blue-black. And actually that was built up so much, the cocoons was so small in there, and it was hard to even cut with a knife. That's just 15, 20-year-old comb.
Right. And final question for tonight is, I bought some hive boxes, some 5-frame boxes from a big-time major supplier in Kentucky. Okay. And because I live in Louisville. And I had a terrible time putting these together. They were unassembled boxes and so forth. And the thing that bothered me the most, while I could get the joints to interlock, and
I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay, well, I could get the joints to interlock. These things were, the bottoms and tops were on different planes. They were twisted or something. So that when I stacked one box on top of another, I had
They would rock.
They would rock. And I had as much as a 2 millimeters, 2 dimes thick, you know, between the two. And I'm wondering what is, now, I'm decided I'm going to build my own boxes from now on.
Okay.
But what is tolerable in terms of gap?
Well, let's go back to the joints you're talking about. We're talking about interlocking joints like this. Called a box joint.
Okay.
I personally have used boxes 25, 30 years. I have some here. Jim's been here. Joe May's been here. There's several of my students been here. I've showed it to them. I stopped branding my boxes 28 years ago. Now, a rabbit joint holds up much longer than a box joint.
No kidding.
A box joint, you got to stop and think about it. You got double the end space open to the weather. So it most of the time, box joints route out the bottom 2 joints.
You're right.
And from year to year, the same manufacturers, their stuff will not interchange. A rabbit joint, you can trim it. And that's why I did classes on building your own boxes. The rabbit where you set the frame should be 3/4 of an inch. Most people that you buy boxes from are 5/8. That means when you put a frame in there that's 3/8 thick on the end, you got very little clearance. And if the box above it has been shaved or a little bit narrower, or you put a lid on top of it, you run the highest risk of squashing a queen. I've been there and I've done that. So everything that I try to teach you or tell you, I've been down there and there's a reason I'm doing it. Build your own boxes and build them 9 7/8. That way, when you get them put together, you do your final cut. You take your rabbet joint, put it down on your table saw, and you assemble your box on your table saw. That way, you got the top where the rabbet is flush and it's flat. On the final step, you set it up against your fence and just barely touch the edges on the bottom, and that trues that up. Then when you stack your boxes, they sit perfectly flat. You're not going to get a newspaper to fit through them.
So I've got 24 boxes now, both mediums and deep nukes, 5-frame, that I don't know, a half dozen or maybe 10 don't play well together. And I'm trying to figure out how to fix these. And I tried it on the table saw, and I found myself kind of in the dilemma of trying to make a 4-legged table. You know, I trimmed a little off of this leg, trimmed a little, and so forth. I just found myself in trouble. So of these 6 or 7 boxes that are problem children,
I think what I would do, since you bought those boxes, I would assemble them and don't use glue. Put the rabbet joint against the fence and put the bottom of the box against your saw blade and then bump it over a 32nd and just barely shave the bottom.
Okay.
Take the minimal amount off you can. That'll
Yes, too late on the glue part, but anyway. Yeah.
Never glue a box.
Okay.
All right. But, you know, you should be getting a hold. You're in Texas now?
No, I'm in Kentucky now, Louisville.
Oh, okay. All right. No matter where you buy your boxes, the word of caution I could give you is one company versus another company. All boxes do not line up. You buy boxes from one company, buy them from another one, and try to stack them. You're going to have a nightmare. If you're going to build your stuff, whatever you start with, if you screwed up the first 2 and you don't want to scrap them, then screw all of them up so they all fit the same. Keep them all the same. That's the, you know, I try to make my stuff where it's standard. And it pays off in the long run.
I agree. I'm going to build my boxes from now on. I'm just going to do it. It's just doesn't make sense. Thank you, Don. I very much appreciate being a part of the chat.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
Joe May, go ahead.
Yeah, I got a comment back to Anthony. Anthony, I think the reason the bees was coming in out of them queen cages, I say they was nurse bees, real small young bees, because you said some of them had them in there and they wasn't getting out. And nurse bees, 9 times out of 10 won't attack the queen. Usually it's just field bees, older bees that attack the queen. That's the reason I say that it worked. That's all I had to say.
Okay.
What do you think?
What was that, John?
I asked Don if he thought that made sense.
Don, did you hear Joe?
Yeah, you know, he said he bought a nuke. That, I think, personally, would be kind of hard to judge that they all be nurse bees. Because from what I understood, Anthony's saying he bought a nuke, and a nuke's going to have bees of all ages in it.
No, he said the bees that was in the queen cage was coming in and out of the cage. I say they was smaller. They was probably nurse bees that they put in with the queens.
Well, but he said he laid 4 cages into a nuke and took them home. That nuke had a queen in it, I assume.
Yeah, it did.
Well, say the bees from where the nuke was, those bees would be bees of all ages, if that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, but the bigger bees couldn't get through the queen cage, probably. Is what I'm saying.
Joe, you could be 100% right, but and Dawn is also right. I put a video on there. I mean, they made the nuke out of about a 10-frame box, and I had 8 frames of a nuke. And I didn't get 5 frames. I got 8. So there's all kinds of bees in there, and either they were the nurse bees that were small, able to get in and out, or they were just small enough to get in and out of this bamboo cage, or the bamboo cage was not made correctly.
Yeah.
Well, and then Anthony's got a smaller race of bee down there too. So there's a lot of things come in play until you're there and actually look at it, you know. The same thing when people call me up and explain their problems. I can't see their problem, and what they're telling me might be totally different what I would see.
But you do find about all nurse bees except the queen.
Yeah, well, that's basically the same thing when you letting a virgin queen walk in. You've got young bees in there. You've got no queen in the hive.
That's all I had.
Okay.
And I would just want to say thank you to Pat and Dawn for teaching me how to boil wax in water. Because I tried it without water. Oh my God, what a mess. And then when I did it outside in the water, geez, it came out nice. And for Matt, you might want to try doing what Dawn does. Don't use any cloth while you're doing it because you do lose some wax. Dawn dumps it through a, excuse me, it's either a stainless steel or an aluminum strainer. I had like a colander. You pour the hot wax through there, and then I take a wooden spatula and I press the slum gum against the side of it. All the wax comes out, flip out the hot slum gum. You lose almost nothing.
That's why I was trying to discuss about making a wax press where it's like a cider press. You could do a large volume and you line the press with either a couple pillowcases, and I use a 20-quart kettle. You could do 10, 15 frames, put it in there, and just take that eye bolt and just keep turning it down. It's like a cider press. And when you keep that pressure on there, all the wax comes out. You don't lose it. And to me, wax is more important and more valuable than the honey coming out of that hive.
Okay. All right. Next up, we have Bobbin. Go ahead, Bobbin.
Hello, Don. Hello to everyone. I want to say something about nukes, how we prepare here in Serbia for sale in April, because we got here cold climate, and we're preparing nukes for selling in June. For example, this year we're preparing in June for selling in April to next year, and we have normal Langstroth brood box split on the two part, and nukes winter is we winter residing nukes on usual on normal big hive, and in April, in early April, we have good price for that early nukes, because we can't have mated queen before May here in Serbia. Sometimes depends what we have the weather here in May. Sometimes we have the first mated queen in end of the May. And maybe for someone that is the idea who can't prepare nukes early, or like that guy who got trouble with nukes for sales, 22 nukes for all years at April to August. He can prepare nukes for sale in July this year, or in July, I mean next year, and he got ready nukes for sales in early spring.
Yeah, you have to keep planning ahead all the time. So that's why I mention all the time, this is the time of year you get your stuff ready for spring. Nukes are going to be hot sellers. There's been a lot of bees lost. California is devastated over there. And then The hurricane didn't do a whole lot of good in Texas all the way through Louisiana. There's going to be such a shortage of bees, you'll be lucky to find them. I'm going to probably start taking orders a little bit earlier this coming year than I normally do because I want to take care of my regular customers. So if you got nukes out there you want to sell, you shouldn't have problems selling them, and don't try to sell cheaper than everybody else to get business. If you got good bees, you don't have to cut prices.
That's all.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see, we got time for 2 more questions. Matt, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to mention, Anthony mentioned to use water to process the wax, and that's actually what I had done. I experimented. I had some leftover boxes, and I'd steamed the wax through it because I had these boxes I made for another project that didn't work out. And by doing that, it actually captured some of the water inside of the wax. And that's when I've taken it. And I just wanted to clarify that, yeah, I've done both. You know, pressing it through a screen is probably the most efficient method in, you know, cleaning it up. But eventually you have to filter it through something. You can't just boil it, is what I found.
I have never had to filter mine. I've had students come here and I have a large roasting pan downstairs. It has coffee filters, it has paint filters, it has old t-shirts, sheer curtains. I put mine, if you look at the videos, I push it through a screen first. And then once I get that, I scrape that scum gum off, and then I reprocess it in water again, and then I pour it. Just pour it through a strainer, and I don't press it at all, because you're going to have just very few debris in there. And then that is the second process. The third one comes out really clean.
Well, what I was getting at is you have to push it through something. You can't just put it into some water and have it separate and have clean wax.
No, you got to boil it to get it all loosened up. Then you have to press it out because the cocoons will hold some.
Just wanted to clarify that.
I got a block. Let me get it. It's right on the table here. All right, there's the block right there.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it. It's never been filtered. Never been filtered. And this is, well, it was going to a bee club to show them how I process it. I have never filtered wax. I don't think you need to. Gravity takes care of it. Same thing when I process my honey. I do not filter honey. I run it out into a 5-gallon bucket. I let it settle for 2 days. I take a large serving spoon and I skim it. Then I put it into a bottling tank. It comes out with a gate valve into jars. It sits in there for 2 days, and I take a teaspoon and take that real fine white wax off, and it's come perfectly clear. So everybody wants to make every job more complicated than it really is. So keep it simple.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, and last up for tonight is Patricia. Go ahead, Pat.
Well, I was wondering, do you think that the reason Anthony's bees were coming and going from the king cages, could it be that that particular type of bee that they have over there isn't as aggressive at a certain stage or something? I don't know anything about the type of bee that he has. I was wondering if that could be something to do with
that I couldn't answer. Anthony might, if Anthony's had experience with bees up here, these European bees, he could have something to compare to. I don't, because I've never experienced those bees. I've never experienced Africanized bees. Don't want to neither.
No, I don't either.
Everything you read about Apis cerana, and I've read from so many different sources, everything states how docile and calm they are. And I certainly see that. And he asked me on a message to see the bamboo cage. This is what it looks like. And it's this stick slides right here. So that's how you get the queen in. And that's what they look like. They look like they should be fine, but like I said, the bees will get on in and out of there. It looked like it would be okay.
Oh, that's cool. That's a good sized gap. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it would be good. They got room to run around in there until they get where they're going, but it leaks. Okay,
And,
guys. Go
my
ahead.
last thing, is, Luke wants to tell you good night.
Night.
That was it. Luke wanted to say good night.
Oh, Joe May's got something to add. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I wanted to ask Anthony a question. How much? What kind of gaps between them bars? You ever measured them?
I didn't measure it, Joe. It's probably 3 to 4 millimeters. It looks like, maybe.
Okay. Well, 3.3 is an eighth inch, so
Yeah.
that's not too big. Okay, that's all I want to know.
Okay. Okay. Good to see everybody. See you in a couple of weeks.
Okay, then that'll call it for tonight. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Don.
Appreciate everybody showing up, and thanks. Night.
Night.